Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Now, generational wealth education is such an important thing in South Africa, and majority of SMME businesses in South Africa fail within the first 2 years. This is because of a lack of structure, poor decision making, but most importantly because of a lack of poor income streams as well as a lack of funding as well. So today we will be looking at how small businesses can grow using the various sources of funding out there, from venture capitalists to the various grants out there. In studio today we do have Paul Petros, who is telling us everything and anything to do with funding, finance, and generational wealth. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. It's a pleasure having you. So let's start off with that word that is used so often in South Africa. I mean, it's one of the most searched words on Google, generational wealth. What is generational wealth?
Well, in my case, I think generational wealth is whereby you've created a vehicle of value that you can pass on to the next generation, and that can be built further from that point. It's not just a trust fund, it's not just a bag of money left somewhere. It's a vehicle that can continue to create wealth for generations to come after you.
Brilliant. So we know that family businesses tend to do very well. Most of them end up becoming generational businesses. We see big businesses that, start off small, but eventually then grow into a generational business. But there's a lot of SMMEs out there, and we just mentioned it now, about 80 to 90% of them fail within the first 2 years of operation. Why is it so common for SMMEs to fail in South Africa?
I think it's not just in South Africa. I think it's a global phenomenon. I think one of the key things that we struggle with as entrepreneurs is identifying a market for the products that we want to launch. What happens is we've got a great big idea. We rush to launch the business, but we have not tested the market to find product market fit. And that is usually the major cause for failure within the first 2 years. Funding put aside, the landscape in South Africa is such that there's a major focus on traction, a major focus on revenue, and therefore you find the venture capitalists operating in this space will look at that first. And that has pushed a lot of these startups to be able to rather focus on generating revenue first, getting a market, and then going to raise funding.
Okay, so a lot of SMMEs then miss out on the research and market research aspect. But why is it that in South Africa compared to other countries, so you look at Netherlands, you look at, like the UK, a lot of young startup businesses are supported, and they don't necessarily have to be making money first before they get a VC or venture capital company to come in and invest in that company. South Africa, it's very different. Like you just mentioned, you have to first be making money, have some form of traction, and then only will they come on board. Why is that different in South Africa compared to other countries?
I think it comes down to ecosystem. So if you look, like you mentioned, Netherlands, and you look at the Silicon Valley, they've created an ecosystem that allows startups to be nurtured and to be funded. It's beginning to happen in South Africa. If you know, there's Silicon Cape, which is very strong in Cape Town. As well, the scene is also growing in Johannesburg. So there's a shift towards that. But you tend to find now that capital can be expensive in our ecosystem. So we're building towards that. But at this moment, we're not there yet. And we hopefully will be there in the next 5 or so years.
Yeah, I think just looking at ecosystems as well, like you mentioned, in South Africa, the ecosystem is very different. And you will see a lot of entrepreneurs and ambitious entrepreneurs always asking the question on, I have this amazing business, I have this brilliant business idea, but I don't have the money to start it up. So funding. Yeah. Funding is a huge problem in South Africa, and we see it happening every single day. Like we mentioned, when it comes to looking for opportunities, be it grants, be it loans, so we do see these opportunities, but the funding is the problem. Yeah. Now, what are some of the funding opportunities that we have in South Africa in particular?
So in South Africa, we have a wide array of grants run by local institutions and international institutions. The government has tried to put mechanisms in place. If you may remember, a few years back, there was a program called the Section 12 Venture Capital Regime. That obviously then came to an end, but the idea around that was to create a system where high net worth individuals are putting in money into these venture capital ecosystems to then be able to fund these startups. And coming back to your question, to say people have ideas and they want to get funding. In this economy, people would rather fund a jockey who has proven themselves, has built a business before, as opposed to funding someone who's totally a greenhorn. And ideas are easy. the hard work is actually starting something, building something, showing that it can work, and then attracting funding. I think it's a much more sustainable model, and it protects against the destruction of wealth and value as well.
Yeah, let's just go into detail on the funding, the different options, right? So I know with grant funding, you know, you don't necessarily have to be paying it back in any way, but there is other forms of funding where it's more seen like a loan. You know, maybe you can just elaborate on that, but also what happens with VCs? Like, how do they come into a business? Do they take shares in the business? Do they take equity? How does that work?
So with venture capital, there are two different structures with this. There's debt, and then there's the equity bit. As simple as that, some offer you debt that you pay over a period of time, and the equity side, they take shares in that. With the venture capital space that we've seen here in South Africa is as I've been reiterating, they want to see traction. Right? Once they see traction, they're happy to back you. They're happy to give you the funding to be able to build whatever you're building. They want to see that you've got strong founders alongside you. You've got a very good market, very big addressable market. You're generating revenue. You may not necessarily be generating profit. And so VCs look at all of those things before they give you the access to the funding that they're looking at. As you mentioned as well, grants. Government grants have been very, very helpful. Corporates also are running grants. So as you may know, RMI used to run, which ended last year, a program called Alpha Code. They would take 10 startups every year, and they funded a lot of startups coming through that, the discoveries of the world, etc. So corporates are also coming into the game and beginning to incubate these startups as well. So it's a wide area of funding structures that are available. All it takes is for the entrepreneurs to look for them and find what fits for them.
Brilliant. We are getting a lot of questions coming in from social media as well. We do have a question from Paul that just wants to know about generational wealth, but we'll get into that in a bit. I do want to include some of our audience out there as well on social media, as well as the people all around South Africa. We did ask some of you guys a few questions, you know, and one of the questions was, if someone gave you R1 million right now, what would you do with it? Let's take a look.
Okay, the first thing that I would do if I get $1 million or R1 million per se, I would register from vets. What's the use of staying here, guys? Let's just try. You know, it's hard, so I might as well just run. Okay, and I would probably invest my money, get some money instead of just being tortured by vets. So yeah.
I would buy myself a car.
Okay, the first thing that I would do if I was given R1 million would be to finance my business idea. The other thing would be to actually give my mom the best life that I think she deserves. So yeah.
If I had R1 million, I would plan a holiday for my family and I. Yeah, to the Maldives or Bali or Bora Bora.
I would invest my money. Like 75% of it, I would put it in stocks, and then 25% I put it in a tax-free savings account.
So if I had to receive R1 million from anyone, I'd probably just try to complete my mom's house and fund my siblings' tuition fees. Thank you.
I'd invested in solar power for my house.
Well, those are some cool responses from some of the students actually at a university in South Africa. You know, some of them said they're going to buy houses, some are going to buy cars, but some are actually going to invest it into stocks and equities. Paul, I'm going to pass that question on to you as well. If someone gave you R1 million right now, you had no worries of rent or leases or whatever, what would you do with that R1 million?
I think the first thing I'll do is invest in myself. I think skills stack, and in as many areas that I'm interested in, I would stack those skills, but a good portion of it would go obviously into my emergency fund, which will be dollar denominated to protect against volatility with the rand. So basically those two main things. $1 million is not a lot of money, so those two things would suffice for me.
Brilliant, Paul. I mean, you're someone who a lot of young people look up to. They follow your tips. You can maybe share with us some of the best business tips when it comes to starting up a business in South Africa. What are some of those hacks or cheat codes that you have for us?
So I'd say if you do not have capital and you have a job and you want to shift into entrepreneurship, I'd say keep the job, mainly because the first thing that you need to ascertain is your cash flow. That may be in the form of your salary. And once you have cash flow, you can then stack and shift that into a side hustle. Once you have acquired a side hustle, you can then leverage that and be able to then shift from full-time employment into full-time entrepreneurship. As is the case on the ground, not many youths are employed. And opportunities are available, but coming back to the issue of funding, there is little that many people can do. So what I would say is find the small things that you can do, find those small wins and leverage and stack those small wins until it's much bigger than what it is now.
Brilliant, Paul. Just in closing, how do we build generational wealth in South Africa? Quick answer.
By creating value.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. By creating value, guys, that is Paul Petros that just shared with us some of the most important ways to be able to look for funding, but also to understand that, you know, you have to build something of value for people to be attracted to it. On that note, let's take a quick ad break. We'll come right back.